Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. We're back. It is the year 2026, and look what the fuck you people do when I leave you alone for 2 weeks. That's ridiculous. Can't believe you motherfuckers are like kidnapping heads of state and shit. That's insane. Look what happens when Geeky Gentlemen goes on hiatus. It's my fault. This is on me.
I'm pretty sure right before we started this, I was reading something about the House potentially voting to take action against Greenland for some fucking reason.
Yeah, I don't fucking know. It's crazy. Anyway, so yeah, here we are, another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. What are we talking about again? Someone had something, and I've honestly forgotten the topic.
Oh, that was my topic. We're going to be talking about the equally serious issue of fandom bullshit. So I was talking to let me get us here. I was talking to Alfie and Steve about Berserk somewhat recently, and about how I had recently gotten into Berserk, and I was kind of complaining that I was just like, Berserk's great. I'm a big fan. I can't really talk about it to people online, because if you go to the Berserk subreddits, there's a weirdly large amount of right-wing weirdos, and if you try to put forth a interpretation on the text that is slightly alternative to what their accepted read on it is, they get really shitty with you, and it's very bizarre. And it got me thinking about this topic of gatekeeping in fandom, because I feel like for the last, ever since the 2010s, when we had that peak of MCU and Super Hulock and all of these niche fandoms getting really big, there was this idea that we shouldn't gatekeep being a nerd or being a fan of something, because we don't want to create a toxic environment. We want to make sure everyone feels welcome. And now I'm fast forwarding to Year of Our Lord 2026, and I look at the fandom communities that I've been a part of for a long time, like Star Wars, and I see just this influx of just the shittiest, most Naziest people who have the worst takes, who will regularly say shit that is just not accurate to the source material. And I think to myself, did we make a mistake? Should we have gate kept a little bit? And that's kind of what I want to talk about, is just this idea of fandom gatekeeping, and is it good actually? Maybe. I don't know. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about.
See,
any thoughts?
I mean, I'm going to initially push back a little bit, because I don't think that the anti-gatekeeping movement was the thing that let in the Nazis. I think the Nazis were there, and they were the ones gatekeeping a lot of it. Particularly around Star Wars, that was such a infamously toxic fan base to begin with. I remember you and me, Matt, doing episodes of Geeky Gentlemen, and I have a bad tendency, personality disorder called being an asshole, where when I pick up on someone's insecurities, instead of respecting their boundaries and stuff, I tend to just point them out and make fun of people for it. And I remember you being I don't want to call myself a Star Wars fan. I'm why not? Do you like Star Wars? And, and you were well, yeah, but Star Wars fans just get so on your case about everything. I'm well, that's ridiculous. And I think like that mentality just is like that gatekeeping mentality just drives me crazy about fan bases. I remember when I was getting into Star Trek, in around the late 2010s, I'd finished the original series and I'd finished and I was about to start Next Generation, but I was like, okay, where did the movies fall into all this? Do I watch some of Next Generation first? So I went to go like look up a watch guide, and the first thing I found is someone asking my same question. I don't really know anything about Star Trek except that there's spaceships, so like, what's my watch order for all these shows and movies and stuff? And the top reply starts with asterisk starships. But anyway, and I was just like, fuck you, man. Like, how can you be such an asshole? And how can so many people make that the top comment? I'd already been through TOS at that point, so I was like already invested. But like, if I had just been the guy asking the question of where do I start with Star Trek, I can't imagine anything that would put me off more immediately than that shit. No, but like legitimately, I don't think the Nazis came because we got rid of gatekeeping. I think the Nazis were kind of already there and had like been relegated to it, and then they got like really reactionary and got all like possessive of like don't touch my trash. That's my interpretation, especially when you look at things like the fucking Gamergate and all that stuff. How broad do we want to get about fan bases? But yeah,
for sure. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
I mean, I think I'm kind of with you both, even though you were arguing against each other. But I think what ended up happening was, I think Matt is right in that the fandoms allowed the Nazis in. And then we have now seen an uptick of the Nazis being the ones that are the gatekeeping, and it's almost sort of like they're two opposite extremes, but they just circle back to being the same thing, give it enough time. Because the big thing that I feel like I remember about the early conversations about gatekeeping is a lot of it had to do with what someone was a fan of and where that originated. Because you'd have people who, like, for example, say they like Batman, and the second you start that conversation with someone, in the before times, the conversation would be, you like Batman, so what do you like, the movies, do you like the cartoons, do you like the comics, or what? And then you would quote unquote gatekeep based on that. So you would have people who were just like fans of Batman in the abstract that were iced out of communities where people talk about Batman because people started taking really seriously, like, oh, you only like the movies, you only like the shitty movies, you only like the shitty comics, and that kind of thing. And then we started broadening the scope a little bit and saying, well, no, if someone likes Batman, just be like, what do you like about Batman? Let's talk about something where we can start building common ground and building different ways of talking about Batman and yada, yada, yada. But then what ended up happening is this illusion of inclusivity that breaking it down, the gatekeeping created its own forms of gatekeeping down the line. Because what you start seeing, and this goes back to a little bit of our conversation earlier about New Mutants, what you started seeing was people whose opinions about certain things they would take as being so set in stone and being so reinforced by the existence of a community around it that they never questioned that there is another way to enjoy something. That if you want to talk about Batman, then you're talking about these concrete stories that are the definitive canon of Batman, even though that went against the spirit of building an inclusive community to begin with. And then you can't argue with each other because there's one person saying, hey, I like this story about Batman in finding the will to live because he's a really sad person. And then this other person saying, actually, if you go back to this one Batman issue, Batman doesn't have depression. It's very stupid to think that Batman has depression. What are you talking about? And that kind of talking past each other allows things like the Star Wars Nazis and the Star Trek Nazis to start coming in, and they use things like social media to start building the gatekeeping things back up. Both of you mentioned fan communities and Reddit, and I feel like Reddit's a really good place to start that conversation, because Reddit seems like a place where you could curate a community where you're not gatekeeping and you're being inclusive, but in practice it does the exact opposite. So for Gundam, for example, Gundam has a bunch of different subreddits that you could join, and you could ask questions, and you can get help on stuff, and yada, yada, yada. And for a lot of the hobbyists in Gundam, they have a motto of gunpla is freedom, basically just meaning that when you're building model kits, there's no right way to do it. It's like Lego, where like you can do it any way, you can customize it any way, you can do whatever you want, you can find the free flow and the artistry inside the model kit, and there's no wrong way to enjoy it. Unless you ask a question in the wrong way on a subreddit, and suddenly the draconian mods start shitting on you for asking the question the wrong way.
I mean, Reddit's so bad that, like, for any large enough nerd fandom, there's the main subreddit for whatever that thing is, and then there's a second subreddit that's like, we're the nice one. You know
Exactly.
and like,
Yes.
there's the Star Wars subreddit, but then there's Star Wars Cantina, then there's Star Wars the sequels. So that way you can post that, hey, I like the sequel trilogy, and not get like a million downvotes and people screaming at you in the comments.
Matt, don't just make things up. No one likes the entirety of the sequel trilogy. That person doesn't exist. Okay.
Not in this country, he doesn't. but I think it's what's interesting that's happening is that it's like, with the way that Reddit specifically, with the upvote and downvote system, it's able to sort of enforce fandom norms. Like, it's not even so much that we're gatekeeping you out of the fandom. You are welcome to like Berserk, but if you post that you think Griffith and Guts's pre-Eclipse relationship is extremely homoerotic and romantic,
okay,
we are going to downvote the shit out of you
because
you're wrong, and actually Griffith was an evil mastermind the whole time and he never felt anything genuine. And if you dare say that something contrary to that, you are going to we're not going to tell you can't be in the fandom, but you are going to feel that aggressive push against you through the use of like community tools like downvotes and upvotes. And so it creates this system where it's like, no one's technically being gatekept, because short of being banned, no one can stop you. But it enforces this sort of like hive mind group think that feels like it renders actual fan discussion kind of meaningless and pointless, because it's like, well, what's the point of me having a discussion with you about this franchise or about this character or about this story if the right and wrong opinions are just going to be enforced by the group think going on here.
There's a politics to it, right?
Yeah.
Right. Like there's a microcosm in fandom that is extremely political, whether they know it or not. And things like social media have mechanisms to enforce those politics, right? Like what you're talking about is, in a political sense, it's like having social death or having a civil death. It's the idea that the community is not going to literally grab pitchforks and kill you, but they're going to make your experience of being in that community so miserable that you might as well either quit or be dead.
Damn.
And I mean, I'm not even saying that as like an extreme caricature, because people get death threats over this stuff all the time.
Dude, did I ever tell you about the time I think it was when I was still on Twitter, when I mentioned like, oh yeah, I really like Kylo Ren. Like when I was young and I was dealing with like my own stuff and felt a little alienated from my family and made some yeah, and I was like, I was young, I felt kind of alienated from my family, I made some bad decisions, and like I relate to that in Kylo, and it was cool to see him kind of struggle with that. And even though I ultimately don't love that final movie, it was cool to see him kind of overcome that. And then someone in my replies was like, "Oh, so you sympathize with school shooters, huh?"
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just like, and then I look at that and I'm just like, man, what happened to fandom spaces? How did it get this way?
See, I feel like it was always this way, that there was always some fucking weirdo, because like a lot of fandoms initially developed as kind of a counterculture way to find community outside of like churches, or I guess more specifically like as the alternative to like sports community, I think is like the closest cultural thing to it. So it's like sports but for not jocks, is how I think a lot of like these geek fan communities start, and then everything's kind of just evolving off of those, because you have like book talk kind of taken off now, becoming a thing. Like women have been reading just porn in public for years and years now, but now they're like finding community out of that, and so now they're like, you know, kind of co-opting or I guess just borrowing the methodologies of how like fan communities have talked and interacted and gathered around these pieces of media for years, and so now there's like book talk conventions and stuff that are starting to pop up. And they've had literally like they've had the same problems that people have associated with, like particularly with like male chauvinism within nerd spaces, of like this was talked about a lot with Gamergate and Comicsgate and stuff, of like, oh, the female cosplayers, they're just doing it for attention, you know, and then like people being rude or violent to them. Well, like the book talk things have had problems now where they've hired like male models and male actors and stuff to be or pose as the characters, so people could take pictures with them, and what did all the crazy female fans do? They start fondling these male actors and male models, and it's like, well, no, that's not okay. Don't do that. So it's like literally it's almost it goes beyond being like, you know, typical problems that we would normally associate with like gender identity and stuff. There seems to be something about like fandom ideology and worship of characters that I don't know, breaks people in a certain way. It's funny to talk about all this because I used to, when I was like not first, but when I was really starting to get into a lot of different fandoms, like dabbling in this, that, and the other, I kind of fell in love with the idea of fandom and the community that came up around it. And it's not that I didn't know that there would be, you know, hostile elements. I certainly ran into hostile elements, you know, sitting there talking in the comic book store and be like, you know, I legit think Batman could take down Galactus. I'm sorry, that's just how Batman is written, is he's capable of that. I don't know how he'd do it, but fucking get Grant Morrison on that book. And like just getting, you know, blasted in the comic store for having that fucking opinion. So like there's just all these different elements, these different things that, you know, you kind of acknowledge that are going to exist for a while, but then it does seem maybe that as you check out of the fandom more, that those negative aspects seem to shine a lot more than you were willing to be aware of when you were initially getting into it. I don't know if there's anything to that.
I think it's interesting that you bring up the example of going to a comic book shop and talking to people, because I think the problem we're experiencing now is that's not how fandoms exist anymore. Mm-hmm. There are still plenty of places and plenty of cities and plenty of communities where you can like have a book club and go to the coffee shop and talk about a book, or go to a comic book store and like chat up with the owner. Like people do that, but fandom as it's constituted now is almost exclusively online for a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And there's this prevailing idea that because it's online, there are no barriers to entry, that anybody can just pop into any community and be parts of lots of different fandoms and yada, yada, yada. But the problem that it kind of comes down to is just because you're in an online space doesn't mean that there aren't rules, just like real spaces that apply. The problem is that those rules are a lot more obscure, and they get built into the medium that you're communicating through, whether that's Reddit or Tumblr or Twitter or Blue Sky or whatever. And those kinds of things start influencing the kinds of conversations you can and can't have. So, like, for example, if you go to a comic book stores are, for the most part, owned by the person who runs the store, right? Like, there are not franchise comic book stores for the most part. There's a few people here and there that like own multiple stores, but for the most part, it's always like a mom and pop operation. So when you go into that store, what's going to be on the stands and what's going to be on the shelves? Well, it's going to be the stuff that sells. And then outside of that, it'll be predominantly whatever that person likes. And so the community they cultivate is based on that. It's based on that rule of like, I go to this shop because this shop owner really likes D&D and they sell a lot of D&D stuff, and I can go there and talk to all these other people that really like D&D, and it forms a sort of community around that limitation. The problem you run into with social media communities and social media fandoms is they're not organized that way. And when someone tries to organize them that way, it starts to become really draconian. It starts to become gatekeepy in a sense, where they're using the social media rules and the algorithms and the community features to selectively create a community that only exists and can only communicate on a certain basis. And that's not necessarily different than a physical community, but because it's online, because it's anonymous, because there are no social cues involved, it can get really rowdy really, really quickly. And of course, Nazis can invade that conversation really easily. And it's so simple to just make 600 burner accounts on a Reddit thread that you don't like and just lambaste the original poster, when you can't go to a comic book store and wear a bunch of like mustache disguises and pretend to be like a disgruntled shopper. Like, it doesn't work that way. So like those guardrails of like, hey, that guy's a jerk, he's not allowed in my store anymore, they don't work online. And even if you did that, it's just as easy for the guy who is disgruntled to then come up with their own community that's entirely based in resentment of the original one. And of all the fandom communities I've been a part of over the years, they all kind of devolve into this. They all kind of devolve into everybody in the community is a hive mind. Everybody talks about the same thing in exactly the same way. They have the same kind of opinions, and they all exist in that space because they spent so much time in other communities where that behavior wasn't rewarded. So they made their own little echo chamber to do that. But that's a really different thing than going out in the world and having a community or having a fandom in that sense. And I think as much as fandom becomes an online experience, the more detrimental it just becomes as a person.
You also have like this, the incentives are different in a in-person conversation versus like forum threads and comment replies, right? Like, I remember I was at my local game store.
It's a comic book shop
I was at
by
my
the
local
beach. Brilliant.
Yeah. I was. Comic book nerds don't go outside to the beach.
Yeah, you can look out through the window. It'll be beautiful. Like, a little reading chair.
Everybody sells beach comics. It's just Archie in there.
Oh yeah, that's great. Just Archie and all the like swimsuit Marvel issues.
Exactly.
But I was at my game store, and we were actually playing Vampire the Masquerade, the tabletop RPG, and the DM and I had very different opinions about about Vampire the Masquerade and like where it was as a franchise and all that stuff. But like in that space, we're just kind of having a nice conversation. We're just having like a back and forth, like, because you're in like a shared communal space and you both love this thing and you're just there to talk and enjoy. Whereas online, because of likes and upvotes and re-skeets and all that shit, there's this incentive to do this like one-upsmanship and to like come in with hot takes and to like come in with like, well, actually, and to come in with all this. And so if you have a disagreement with someone in real life, you can just sort of hash it out and talk. But on Reddit or on any sort of social media, the incentive is they're gonna look for the comment. They're going to consider what they're going to say. They're going to type out a response. They're going to wait for the upvotes to come in. And then if you reply to that, they're going to want to, reply. And you see this on all these different social media sites of just these comment threads that just become increasingly hostile as each person is like trying to get the last word in. And it's like, that's not how conversations typically operate in real life. But because we're seeing increasingly more movement of our social circles to online, not just in fandom spaces, but in general, like they've talked a lot about how like these, I forget what the kind of like sociological term for them is, but these like shared community spaces like malls and like comic book shops, these places are starting to struggle. They're not doing as well. And you're not seeing the same sort of more in-person communities building up. And I think that, like you were kind of saying, inherently leads to hostilities because these social media platforms are pretty much designed to incentivize it. You want to come in there and have the hot take that disagrees with the person. So in that sense, having just like a respectful discussion where all views and all interpretations are respected and maybe disagreed with, but still, talked about in a kind way or in an enthusiastic way. That just kind of doesn't happen anymore in those spaces. And I find that that's extremely frustrating, especially because I know that I'm not immune to it. Like I've done it. I've gotten into comment fights with people on Reddit all the time. Did you know I'm actually banned from commenting on the Star Wars subreddit?
No. What happened?
What did you do? Not that it takes much, but what did you do?
Oh, it was a couple years ago. Someone made a post about the like female actors of the sequel trilogy, like Daisy Ridley and Kelly Marie Tran and all that. Basically making a comment about how like, oh, I bet these, terrible women are excited to, hopefully return because it's not like they've got anything else going on for them. And I commented something like, oh, wow, another day, another Star Wars fan being weird about women online. Like, oh. Man. And that got me banned as being like hostile.
That's hilarious.
And I was like, but like, that gets me banned for being hostile to the OP, but like, shouldn't the poster get banned for being weird and creepy about women in this fandom space?
No.
Like, it's odd to me that we're not calling those things out. And it's like, we are gatekeeping, but we're gatekeeping in the stupidest ways possible. And we're not gatekeeping the shit we should gatekeep, I guess, is part of this conversation.
Well, that's an interesting thing, because once you introduce these rules, you don't want to have people commenting on someone's post just to dunk on them and call them weird, right? Like that's objectively like what you did would violate the letter of the law, right? But
absolutely,
at the same time, do you want to get so specific with the rules that you have, but don't talk about the personalities or looks of the actors in the film franchise we're all fans of? You're getting weird. Like I completely agree that it sounds like the dude was being an asshole, but like the rule that you would need to ban that behavior is so fucking specific. It's so annoying.
Well, and that's why people make these assumptions that things like Reddit and Discord and back when Mastodon was trying to take off would be better, because the idea was, because individual mods are in charge of it, they could be flexible about the rule and actually exercise their judgment on these things. But in practice, that's never what happens, right? Like, case in point with what Matt was saying, like the moderator on a Reddit thread should be able to discern that that's the problem, but they don't. They don't, because those kinds of behaviors are just the norm on social media. This is very similar to like what happens with the Geekvolution community, right? Because I was in that for years. And I remember we had all of these rules about like, hey, we don't talk politics on here, we don't curse on here, everyone should be allowed here. And as a kid, you're in that space and you're not questioning, why should I be allowed in the same space as Nazis? But you thought in general that was the right thing to do, and we had our own forum and everything, right? But the problem is exactly what happened with Matt, where when someone says a shitty thing, if you try to fight them on the thing that they said was shitty, then you become the aggressor because you're the one who violated the rule, even though the rule isn't actually there to protect anybody and is not working in a way to protect anybody. And the more you try to like make it seem like there is these objective guidelines to how these things are being set up, the more you're just submitting to the fact that the rules actually have their own sort of ideological workings, right? The problem with a lot of social media at the end of the day is everything's driven by algorithms, and the algorithms are not unbiased. They're not unbiased, and they do not lack an ideology. They always are inherent to whoever's programming them. So people say things like Twitter is a space where like the things that get engagement are the things that are the best for whatever reason. But that's not actually true. If you believed in free speech and you were on Twitter, then you would abolish the idea of an algorithm that upvotes certain posts over others. But it doesn't work that way. It works in a way where the more engagement something draws, the more popular it becomes, and then whatever behavior sparked that engagement is the thing that everyone is going to replicate. But the second you start questioning the thing that's making the engagement happen, you're the one that's the problem.
It's also like, I'll keep this on Star Wars for just a minute, and then we can kind of broaden. But like, I remember when people were talking about like, okay, Star Wars fans harassed Kelly Marie Tran off of social media. Star Wars fan harassed Jake Lloyd. They harassed Ahmed Best. They harassed the woman from the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, whose name escapes me at the moment. And it's like, if you try to say that and be like, we need to be aware that that happened and we need to actively look for that and call it out when we see it, you'll get met with like a lot of like, well, that wasn't everyone, and those aren't real fans. Real fans weren't doing that. And I'm like, but they were. They are real fans. Real fans are the ones doing that, and that's the problem. And we want to live in this bubble where we put our hands over our ears and we ignore the fact that those real fans who love this thing just as much as we do, they're the ones who did that. And we need to accept that, because we have to internalize that could potentially be any of us, and we need to be willing to call it out. We need to be willing to gatekeep, in the sense that once someone crosses that line from being critical of something to being racist and shitty or sexist and shitty or whatever, then we need to call that out. And it's almost like we've like lost where that line is, because you'll see all the time like, oh, just because I criticize this thing, that makes me a sexist. It's like, no, it's the way you did it. It's how you went about it. Or it's the fact that you sent, actual messages to the actress or whatever. And it's like, we've lost our ability to call those things out, because if we call that out, then suddenly like, it's the equivalent of like fighting back against your bully in recess, but the teacher only saw you throw a punch. They didn't really see that you were victimized first.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good.
Like, that's what it is.
Man, I wish I still did Geeky Gentleman clips. If there was only some way for someone to handle that.
If only that was still an option that you could exercise. If only the mods would allow it.
Yeah.
I know.
Sorry, guys, my hands are tied.
No, absolutely, and I mean, and part of what you're saying there too is the idea of fandom, or the existence of fandom, has become its own sort of nebulous category that a lot of people appeal to whenever they want to try and justify what they're saying without making any actual sense. I remember when the Suicide Squad movie was coming out, the first one, the 2016 one, and when it got bad reviews, everyone involved was like, but it was for the fans, it's for the fans. Every time a Marvel movie does bad, it's like, well, it's for the fans. Every time someone has criticisms of a thing that they already are a fan of, the response is, it's for the fans. And forgetting for a second that like fan in general is sort of a nebulous category, the idea that we talk about fandoms as like this sort of concrete thing, this group that always exists, this community that you're always a part of, is kind of the problem, right? Like it's this illusion that like, if you're a fan of something, then you've got a card that registers you as a fan, and you're in the system as a fan, and you're always a fan until you opt out. But that's not how these things work, right? Anybody can be part of any community online insofar as they're engaging with it. And when you start talking about fans or fandom and sort of the broad scope of things, it sounds like you're talking about a whole lot of people, but you're really not. You're not talking about anybody. And the more you sort of appeal to this illusory idea of fandom, the more these communities and the more this sort of like sucker mentality of, oh, this is for me, this is mine. And this is sort of where I wanted to circle the other way with this, is part of the problem with fandoms at this point is it's become nearly impossible to distinguish fandom from justifying consumptive behavior for no reason. And that's why that sort of nebulous category exists the way it does, because so much of fandom is just consumption. It's just, I need to talk about and engage and buy this thing all the time, because my identity as a fan of this thing that I have been labeled, is a thing that I need to constantly justify. I mean, we saw people do this with the new Superman movie too, right? Where like, people are so mad at the movie and they don't like it, and on Twitter on a daily basis, on Blue Sky even, in Reddit, everyone who's mad about it always gets met with the same response of like, if you didn't like it, just kind of move on. I thought it was a great movie and I moved on. I haven't thought about it since I saw it in the theater. But the people who hate it keep talking about it, and then you try to push them on that and say, if you don't like it, just move on. And there is a genuine like disbelief that those people have. Like, what do you mean? You can't just move on. You're not supposed to just move on. There's a movie critic I follow on Twitter, and I think he was talking about the new Fantastic Four run, or the current Fantastic Four run, which he didn't like very much, and I also don't like very much. And he was getting a bunch of like angry responses and retweets and stuff about it. And someone said like, oh, if you're a fan of something and it's bad, you should just give up on it and move on. And the guy's like, yeah, 100%. That is the healthy thing to do. But people don't do that, because so much of fan behavior now, it's not community, it's not groups, it's not shared beliefs, it's consumptive behavior. It's just, I buy this thing. My identity is driven by the fact that I buy this thing. Everything I talk about needs to be in service to this thing, whether I'm enjoying it or not. And so when you start getting into those really toxic fandoms or Reddit threads and stuff, everyone here is engaging with this community. But the thing you really got to ask is, the people that are on there the most, and the ones that are the most miserable, and the ones that seem to hate it the most, why don't they just leave? Why don't they just log off? And it's because the fandom becomes their identity.
Hold on, I gotta find the best take ever. The quintessential fandom take that I had with a Twitter interaction a week or so ago. I've got to go through my notifications and find it. I sent it to you, Steve, because it was like so fucking perfect.
I'm curious.
Oh, okay, hold on. I'll find it. Oh my god.
I believe in you.
Almost there. Okay. Here we go.
Yes.
So this all started with Star Wars Holocron posting. Ryan Johnson says the worst sin in Star Wars is to be afraid of doing anything that shakes it up. Having grown up a Star Wars fan, I know that thing where something challenges it, and I know the recoil against that. I know how there can be infighting in the world of Star Wars, but I also know that the worst sin is to handle it with kid gloves. The worst sin is to be afraid of doing anything that shakes it up. because every Star Wars movie going back to Empire and onward shook the box and rattled fans and got them angry and got them fighting and got them talking about it, and then for a lot of them got them loving it and coming around on it eventually. And so motherfucker just replies to this and goes, in play school there used to be toys that belonged to the school. There were kids that take care of the toys they are given to play with, and those who would smash them together and destroy them to the point where they were broken. The children who do that are only thinking about the now, the enjoyment they have in that moment. They are not concerned with the future if they want to play with those toys again, or if any other kids might want to play with those same toys. No one likes to play with broken toys. Have fun, play, but don't destroy them in the end. Those toys don't belong to you. And so my reply to that is, honestly, just a perfect take on everything that's wrong with not only Star Wars fans, but fandom in general. Thinking of art as toys, perfection. And then their reply to this, so just accept and consume? Honestly, that doesn't sound like a better alternative. We were talking about a multi-billion-dollar franchise, not a painting hanging in the Louvre Museum. I'm like, okay. I got shitty with him after that. He got shitty back, and then we just stopped talking. But that was that was just like the most, just, you know, love or hate Last Jedi, whatever. But I think everyone can acknowledge that, like, whether or not you liked the choice to do so, Rian Johnson was actively trying to do new things and push the story in a direction, which you cannot argue for Rise of Skywalker whatsoever. Rise of Skywalker did the amazing thing where it literally tried to make everyone happy, and in the process made no one happy. But that's to Rian Johnson's point of trying to do something new and then getting a reaction of, but those are my toys, is just like the ultimate like fan pushback. And that's like, God, I got so tired of seeing so much bitching about the Superman movie this year. I'm like, well, if you don't like it, why are you doing this to yourself? Just, you know, check out. If you've decided that you're not into this franchise, that like the choices being made or whatever really, really irk you, you don't have to watch it. You don't have to sit there and do that to yourself where you just bitch about it. If you know you aren't going to like it, just check out. And then if you're still going to see it regardless, just because you're a fan of the thing and you want to like show it financial support so they keep making more of the thing you hate for whatever reason, then just go see it when it comes out, bitch about it for like a day, and then just be done with it, move on with your life. And I told someone that, and the response I got was, well, that's the most ridiculous thing. You just have to like everything. No, it's not about liking everything. And genuinely, if you have fun shitting on a thing, fine. But I can't believe that anyone actually has fun shitting on something for months on end. I fundamentally cannot believe that. Like, what was the fucking Red Letter Media did his 1.5-hour Star Wars prequels video and chat on them. And like, I'll make some riffs on the Star Wars prequels, right? Like, it's fun to rag on something from time to time. But if you're spending every day ragging on the same thing for months on end, every time James Gunn says anything on Twitter, you're sitting there getting in a fucking huff about it. I don't know what to tell you. That's ridiculous behavior to me.
It's exactly like you said, right? It's a kid at recess in the playground in preschool. It's preschool behavior.
It's also like, I don't know. Those Red Letter Media videos are actually like clever and funny, but that's neither here nor there. They're not whoever these new YouTubers are doing these like 12-hour why this movie is a cinematic abortion, and they spend 20 minutes talking about a 2-second joke like it's like 9/11 happening in front of them. But that's another thing that's interesting to me when you were talking about like him comparing the movies to toys. There's this interesting thing in fandom right now that's like been very frustrating to me, and I've had this conversation with Carly I don't know how many times. It seems like so many like nerd fandoms are incapable of engaging with the media of their fandom as what it is. Like, they're incapable of engaging with, let's say, The Last Jedi as a film. They're engaging with it as like a collection of lore, as a continuation of this like history and they're not really engaging with it as a movie. When I think about Luke's story in Last Jedi, the reason it resonates with me is I like the idea that Luke in the 70s film represents that, like, every kid in the suburbs who was like always excited to get out there and get away from his hometown and see the world, and that's kind of what he represented in that movie. And then you get to Last Jedi, and Last Jedi tells this story where it says, you know, those kids who got out of their hometown, life doesn't always get easier when you get older. Sometimes life gets harder when you get older. And it's easy to look back at your life and be like, oh man, did I make the right choices? Did I fuck up? And then it can paralyze you. That's like what a midlife crisis is. And it's a whole movie about how, like, no, you didn't fuck up. I mean, maybe you did, but you can still find inside you that person you used to be, and you can move forward again. That is a immensely powerful message. That's such a cool story to tell. But we can't talk about that because the fandom is over here like, oh, well, you know, canonically it's ridiculous that Luke died from using the Force too hard. And it's like, okay, I'm trying to engage with this as an art form. I'm trying to engage with this film for the ideas it's tackling and the emotions it's trying to elicit from me. And you are over here complaining about lore logistics. And it's like, where is that breakdown happening? Because
okay.
I don't want to have this conversation with you.
All right, I just want to sidetrack us for a minute from that, because that's a really, really good point. But it also made me think of this. So this will be like a fun little aside to show, you know, we are human. Because you're talking about that, and I 100% agree. But I think, and if you say no, not me, then I don't believe you, and you're just a bad liar. I think everyone does have that thing of, like, they're just too attached to, like, the thing itself as opposed to the new thing presented, that they get, like, caught up on the lore, and it's hard for them to accept or look at the thing just as a new piece of media. So I think it'd be fun to go round robin real quick and talk about an example of that for everyone so that we can acknowledge that we are human, and I think everyone falls into this. So my one is definitely Tom King's Omega Men, where, like, it's a really good in-depth character study and story and, like, metaphor for Kyle Rayner being, like, this, you know, take on just Tom King's experience in the Middle East and, like, his view on you know, where Israel and Iraq and Iran fall together and all this stuff. I think that's all really, really interesting. But it bothers me so fucking much that, like, Kyle can't tap into the whole emotional spectrum, and that, like, he's literally got the power to make everybody feel compassion for each other, and he just doesn't use it in that story because Tom King just didn't know he could do that. That really bothers me from, like, a lore perspective, and it makes it maybe a little hard to fully appreciate that story. So Steve, do you have one?
I have one, but I want to go last because I want to piggyback off of Matt's point.
Okay. Matt, do you have one?
I haven't seen season 2 yet, but the first season of Fallout is surprisingly good. I'm very annoyed with the changes they made to how ghouls work.
Okay.
Because ghouls are like people who are exposed to way too much radiation, and so it's kind of mutated them into these, like, zombies. And they basically will live forever, but eventually their minds they'll lose their minds and they'll go feral and they'll just become, like, mindless zombies. And that's interesting. It puts this, like, cool ticking clock on them. People don't know if they can trust them because at any moment they could go feral. It's a really interesting thing. In the Fallout TV show, they made it so ghouls have to take basically a drug to stave off going feral. And I hate it. It's stupid. It counteracts the lore. It's dumb. Get that shit out of here. I'm not saying lore isn't important. Lore has a place as long as lore knows its place.
Okay. Steve, do you have one?
I do. Mine's kind of like Matt's, where it's all focused on a specific character, but mine's always been the Winter Soldier and Bucky in the comics, and him becoming Captain America. Because the whole thing in the comics is he becomes Captain America after he realizes that he spent decades and decades as a Soviet assassin, and can't find a way to forgive himself, and he just crosses the country with life has no meaning. And then Captain America dies, and he writes him a letter saying, like, hey, I think you should be Captain America, not because you'd be good at it, but because you need something to help you understand that you're a better person. And that this is a way for you to learn to move on, and that's how he does it. And in the movie, that's the exact reason why he can't be Captain America, and it bothers me so much. So they have that whole conversation at the end of Endgame, and he's like, yeah, I guess I could take the shield and use this to find purpose in my life, but why don't you take it, Sam? And it just bothers me. I don't know. Endgame's not a very good movie, but that always bothers me. But piggybacking off of Matt's point about fans not being able to engage with the art form, Ian, it's funny that you mentioned Tom King, because I think this is a thing that people really, really have a hard time with him. Mm-hmm. And it's because I have a really hard time accepting that someone's a comic book fan, and this is me gatekeeping, but it's going to start to make sense when I explain this, because I think when people say they like comic books, they don't mean that they like comic books. They mean that they like Shonen Jump manga and big two American Marvel and DC superheroes. That's what they mean. They like superhero comics, which is fine. You can do that. You're allowed to like that. There's nothing wrong with that. But comic book fans are not the same thing and are not reducible to superhero fans. If the only thing you read is superhero comics, then I don't think you're a comic book person. I think you just like superheroes, and that's fine. But then don't start getting bent out of shape about things that are unique and specific to comics. So Tom King always gets a lot of flack because of how he writes characters, because he doesn't care about the continuity, and he just uses them to tell his stories, which is good and interesting, and I like that. But what that leads to is it leads to a lot of media illiterate comic book fans trying to make comic book critiques that they just do not have the brain capacity for sometimes. A few months ago, I saw someone had sent me a tweet where they looked at like a 9-panel grid that Tom King did in a comic, and I don't remember what the comic was, and they're like, look at this person, look at all of the decompressed storytelling, look at how he just wastes an entire page.
Wasn't it
this
the
is
Mr. Miracle when he's climbing the fucking machine?
That's what it was. Yeah. Yeah, so like, this is just a waste. Yeah, this is just a waste of time. Tom King doesn't know how to write comics. I'm like, okay, look, let's pretend like I accept your definition of a decompressed comic, because it's not one, but let's pretend I accept that. I don't think you understand what a 9-panel grid is supposed to do if your complaint is that it's too much time taken up on one page. What do you think a panel grid is for? It's to take up time on a page, and you use the grid differently based on how much time you want the reader to spend on the page and how you want their eyes to go. If you don't like that kind of formalist storytelling, fine, whatever. But that kind of goes to this larger point of like, this is not a comic book fan. This is not a person who's interested in critiquing the way that the form is being utilized. This is a fan with their fan brain upset with a comic and lacking the vocabulary to explain it properly. So they just say the exact opposite of what's happening on the page. And I think when you're in Twitter or Reddit or on any other sort of social media spaces, the fact that you've said that is going to start conversation, it's going to start engagement. So even if I responded, for example, I didn't respond, but if I responded, for example, and I explained to them and linked to them my several articles written about Tom King comics saying, hey, you don't have to like this, but this is how it works, and this is why it's done this way, it wouldn't matter. Because the second you've posted the take, the second that you have said that this is where your stance is, you can't double back. You could. A normal human being in a regular conversation might, but when you're online, you can't. And that's when you start finding your people, right? You make a post that's dumb as shit, and someone says, hey, the thing you said is dumb as shit. And then the people start responding, actually, no, it's not dumb as shit. It's not dumb as shit. And then those people become their own little comic book community or their own little fandom community that engages in that kind of behavior because that's the post that they're seeing. And once that thing becomes popular, you can't back away from it. All you can do is kind of double down on it. And again, that kind of comes back to this idea of it all just sort of being consumptive behavior. Everyone wants to be a part of the conversation, regardless of whether or not they're enjoying being part of the conversation.
Yeah. Also, like, I feel like in some fandom spaces, this is where I start to sound kind of elitist and snobby, but that's okay. There's also this problem of, like, it's kind of a larger point going off of what you said. This unwillingness to engage with not only just the media for what it is, but sometimes to engage with the media at all. The Silent Hill fandom is notorious for being made up of people who've never played the fucking games. They watch YouTube video essays about how Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 1 and Silent Hill 3 are all like groundbreaking horror masterpieces. And those video essays are cool, some of them. And, you know, there is truth in that. But then they'll go on to have these very strong opinions about what this franchise is and should be. And that came to a big fever pitch with a huge debate in the fandom around the newest game, Silent Hill F. And it was very clear from just engaging in some light conversation with these people, you've not played these games. You've never actually directly engaged with this material yourself. You have engaged with it secondhand through other people's reactions and thoughts on it, because you are either parroting exact talking points that everyone has heard a dozen times, or you are offering a very shallow surface level, you know, something you could glean just by looking at video footage. And I think that becomes a problem where I go, I'm sorry, I don't think you're actually really that much of a fan of this thing. I gotta gatekeep a smidge, a little bit, a tiny bit.
No, 100%. If you want to have an opinion on a thing, you should have experienced that thing. I don't think it's going too far to say, if you want to have an opinion on a video game, you should have played the game.
Right, like,
I think
there's
this
a whole
came up
slew
at one point with comics, of someone being like, well, it's just so unfair that comic fans expect you to have like this vast knowledge of comic properties when a lot of us can't even afford these books, so we're just engaging with, you know, what we see online. We're getting like criticized for not reading the books. I'm like, if you have not read the comic you were complaining about, you do not have it, like, you have negative ground to start talking about it, and especially you have negative ground to start like condemning it. No, everyone's seen a fucking out of context panel. I've not read All-Star Batman and Robin. I've just seen the goddamn Batman. I've made the meme jokes. It's fine. But, like, I'm not sitting here talking about how bad a comic book that is. You know?
Yeah, exactly. There's like a whole slew. There's a whole slew of like British and American made Silent Hill games after Silent Hill 4, like Origins and Downpour and Homecoming. I've never played them. I have no intention of playing them. So I don't have an opinion on them. I don't give a shit about them. And that's my thing. Is I'm like, you don't have to have an opinion on things that you haven't experienced. And guess what? I like the lore of Warhammer 40K. I've played like 2 video games and I've listened to a bunch of lore YouTubers. I've never read a Warhammer 40K book. I've never played a game of the tabletop. So I don't really have a lot of opinions on it. I just think it's kind of neat. And that's fine. You can do that. But it's odd to me that someone in a similar situation to me would then go online or enter a fandom space and act like they have like very strongly held opinions about a thing. Because it's like, you can like it, you can just vibe with it. You don't have to get into fights on the internet about it.
I'm 100% with you. I completely agree with you. But I want to mention an example of when that can go the other way and when it's not worth it. So Warhammer is a really good example because there are different aspects of the franchise that you can engage with and be a fan of. Like, you can read the novels, you can play the game, you can play the video games, and your experience and ideas and opinions about it can be exclusive to that thing. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is really similar. Like, you can be a fan of the anime, the manga, the card game, whatever, and those worlds don't have to cross over. In my broken brain, if I like a thing, I gotta know everything about it. So I have to dive into all aspects of it. So when I got into building Gundam model kits a few years ago, I started with a G Gundam kit because G Gundam was always my favorite as a kid. And yeah, exactly. It's the best. It's the best one. And after that, I bought the Gundam Origin manga, and I started going through that, and I started buying Gundam kits based on that. But here's the thing: the Gundam Origin manga is a mangaization of the original anime. It's its own thing, but it's just a retelling of that. But in my mind, anytime I wanted to buy a mobile suit kit from that time frame, from that original series, I would only let myself buy the ones that are specifically from the origin, because that's the only thing I knew. And even now, when I go through and I buy model kits, I don't buy a Gundam kit if I have not seen or read the thing that it came from. So every time I go to a store,
I'm genuinely going to be the same way.
Yeah, no, exactly. And every time I go to the store, I always see this cool as shit samurai-style Gundam called the Gundam Astray Red Frame. And every time I see it, I'm like, this is so cool. This is so cool. I really want it. I really want it. But I have no idea what Astray is from. I can't just buy it and build it if I don't know what it's from.
Carly used to see a bunch of Force Awakens merchandise before the movie came out, and she was like, "Oh, look at all these like cool Kylos. Like he looks so cool, but I don't know if I'm gonna like him, so I'm not gonna buy any of the merch." Then Force Awakens comes out. She becomes like a huge fan of Force Awakens. Specifically, it's like her favorite Star Wars movie. She fucking loves Force Awakens, and I'm right there with her. I love Force Awakens, and it then became a gateway for her to get into the rest of the series. Then she wanted to go buy some Kylo merchandise, but it was all fucking sold out, and she couldn't find it. Like, that's so tragic.
That's the curse you run, honestly. I mean, I'm the same way. I'm really picky about, like, I don't buy a lot of like comic book based things outside of physical comic books. Like, I don't go out of my way to buy Batman statues or Batman posters and stuff. But if I do, it's gotta either be drawn by someone I recognize and like, or it's gotta be an issue of something I like. So like, I don't buy Batman figures, but the one Batman figure I bought because it was a Jim Lee Hush Batman figure.
And you love Hush. Steve Baxi, infamous fan of Hush. Ultimate defender, really.
I do not like the Hush comic, but I've said multiple times, I think my favorite Bat suit is the Jim Lee Hush suit.
It is really good. It's sexy.
It's a really good design. The blue and gray with the black bat, it's so fucking cool. I love it.
I haven't read it. Well, I've read the first 2 issues, but I think the dark patterns look might be my favorite Bat suit ever.
Oh, I'm writing an article about that actually as we speak, so that's exciting.
He looks so pretty. But yeah, no,
I
absolutely.
love it. Dark Patterns is so good.
I've not seen this. Oh, that's not
Yeah,
bad.
it's
Yeah.
the first couple issues were like, oh my god, it's like hard-boiled detective shit. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, it's
Ian,
got a bit of the Keaton mixed with like more your traditional comic booky. Yeah, that's bad.
I think you would really like that series because it's a 12-issue miniseries, and it's basically just 4 3-part stories in a row. That's all it is. It's just
yeah,
and it's the same writer and artist all the way through. So like the first one's called The Wounded Man, and the second one's called like The Voice of the Tower or something like that. Like it's very animated series-esque in that way.
Oh, dude, I read like a couple issues of The Voice of the Tower, and when they kind of reveal what's going on, I'm just like, this is the coolest shit ever. But
it's so good. It's so good. I think either The Voice in the Tower or the third one is my favorite, where Batman goes to investigate a body that's found inside of a dryer, and it's just such a sad and cool ending. It's a really good book.
Can I take us in one more direction, unless Ian, you had something to say on what we've been talking about?
Do a real quick one.
Yeah, it's your show. Fucking tell me to shut up.
Matt, do I have your permission?
And that's when Ian kicked him off the call.
So I don't think I've seen my ideal bat suit, but I've like got one in my head. And funny enough, it's not for Bruce. It's the suit that I wish Dick Grayson had. And I've still never actually found it anywhere. I've just seen like elements of it here. So my ideal bat suit is for Dick Grayson Batman, and it's to do the full black suit with the blue bat instead of the Nightwing thing, but keep the fact that the the wings go over the shoulders. For the
Oh
symbol,
yeah.
so like really big bat goes over the shoulders, and then this is the real like killer thing, blue cape and cowl. Like the
Yeah.
same blue as the bat, and then maybe you do blue trunks, maybe blue boots or gloves. That those are the details that kind of come and go, but that's my go-to ultimate Nightwing Batman suit.
That's a good one.
Thank you.
Nice.
Matt, you were gonna say something else before I rudely interrupted you on my show. That's the Samurai Mac is fucking kick ass, though, Steve.
Oh god. Oh god. There's one other element to gatekeeping that I kind of wanted to talk about that sort of gets away from fandom very slightly, and that's about like the idea of gatekeeping as preserving a subculture. Yeah, no, we shouldn't. But the idea of gatekeeping as a way of preserving a subculture. There's this idea that like hip hop as a genre had gatekeepers. And gatekeepers were people who kind of chose what artists got popular, who kind of got to be big. And there's negatives to that. The negatives being that people who are maybe doing something a little bit left of center might not get noticed. But the positives is that they kind of get to control the terms upon which this thing is engaged with by the broader media. And because it's this very like culturally relevant thing, they're able to kind of retain a little bit more power in that dynamic. And I think that that's worthwhile. And I don't want to compare fandom bullshit to like the art of marginalized groups or whatever, but you see that a lot in different subcultures. So like the goth subculture is notoriously gatekeepy. They are fucking insane about it. If you come in there and say the wrong band or call the wrong thing goth, they will eat you alive. And same thing with like, but like, I can understand why they do that, because the idea of like the goth GF has been so like corporatized and sanitized that people think they're engaging with goth, but they're not. They're not engaging with what it historically has been and what it in kind of their view should be. Same thing with like punk. If you're engaging with punk and you're not bringing those like DIY ethics, you're not bringing the like no homophobia, no sexism, no racism, then you're not really engaging with punk. That's why when right wingers or like national socialist black metal bands try to come into these spaces, the gatekeepers, quote, of those communities are going to tell them to fuck off, because they want to preserve what that thing is, and they want to preserve what it looks like to the broader culture and how the broader culture engages with it. And I feel like that has a place, and I think that that's a very interesting angle of gatekeeping. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, but that's something I was also thinking about, is like gatekeeping as a force for retaining the kind of essence of a thing and not letting it get overly corporatized or broadened to the point where it's no longer that thing anymore.
I mean, I'll just say respect to the punk movement for creating a song that any band could cover to play at any show of Nazi punks, yes. Nazi punks, Nazi punks, fuck off.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
No, 100%. I mean, I think you see this a lot more with music than you do anywhere else.
Yes.
And when it doesn't happen, you're definitely familiar with the consequences, like country music. Because country music definitely has a lot more humble origins, but now it's all this sort of stadium country music, this very corporatized version of it that's essentially just made by committee pop music with millionaires in their private jets writing country songs about working out in fields and stuff. There's a lot of that too with independent movies too, which I really like, and it can be infuriating to some people because it means that access to those things can be so limited, which I get, like that's a problem. But the greater thing about it is you're making sure that the movies that you're making, that the actors that you're working with, that your vision of it isn't compromised by like a faceless streamer. that it doesn't just get sold off for bits and parts and become IP. This is part of why I think The Matrix Resurrections is just such a good movie, because it's a movie that is trying intentionally to tank the concept of the IP because it originated from such a personal place and it didn't want to see be perverted into a franchise. So, I mean, there's a lot of that. I know with the Parker books, the series of crime novels from the 60s, those are really popular novels, and Darwin Cook did a whole series of Eisner-nominated and Eisner Award-winning graphic novel adaptations. But outside of Donald E. Westlake, no one's written a Parker novel because the estate doesn't want other people doing Parker novels. The only time someone's done an original Parker story since then is when Ed Brubaker got to write a short Parker story for the Darwin Cook collection, and he could only do that after he wrote the script, took it to the estate, they read it over, and they weren't sold on it. So he asked Sean Phillips to draw the story and then brought it to him, like, do you like it now? And then they said yes.
Wow.
Jesus.
But like,
yeah,
it's worth
exactly.
it, right? Like, it's better than it just being, like, appropriated and everything being called a Donald Westlake story or something, even though it's not.
I mean, that's one of those things where it's like, we all, like, as nerds, we kind of agree that, like, okay, we shouldn't gatekeep things because we should let people get into things. But at the same time, it's like, but I think there is something to be said for gatekeeping in the sense of, like, you can't just come into a space and be like, this thing is, you know, whatever this is, because you're going to get to the point where nothing is anything anymore and everything becomes corporatized schlock, where it completely loses what made that original thing special. And so I think gatekeeping in that sense does make sense, but you also have to be careful because a lot of punks don't really like the big pop punk bands like your Green Day and your Blink-182 because they feel like they sold out or they're not real punk. And it's like, sure, they're not real punk, I guess, but they are gateways. They are a thing that is a stepping stone into getting into the more hardcore DIY stuff. Like, you can't, how many people went from Green Day to Bigwig or went from, you know, Blink... Yeah, not you. Went from Blink-182 to even like No Effects or something like that. And it's like,
I don't like
so that's okay. I like punk music enough. I like punk music enough for all three of us.
That's okay.
I like punk music.
I don't know. I have this weird opinion that music should sound good. But that's just me.
Oh, you're gonna get ratioed so hard in our punk.
You don't get it. You don't get it. It sounds bad on purpose.
No, I understand. I'm vehemently against that attitude.
I mean, don't get me wrong. As someone whose favorite punk band is Bad Religion, I also prefer when music sounds like the people making it know how to play their instrument. So there is punk music that does that, I promise. But my point is that, like, yeah, I do think in today's globalist economy, I probably shouldn't say globalist. In today's global economy,
Jew economy. Yeah, Jew economy. Just say it.
Yeah, exactly. In today's Jewish-run media, where everything is preyed upon by corporations to be in the next big thing, when everything is trying to like be mass appeal and mass market to everyone, I do think there is a place for gatekeeping and gatekeepers to kind of put a hand up and say, like, this is not this thing that we all love, and we need to be able to kind of have those conversations. And I feel like that's kind of a weird little muddy area where it's like, how do you navigate that without being shitty to people who are like trying to learn more about a thing, or who maybe got introduced through this mainstream watered down version of it? Like, do we want to let those things exist, or do we rail against them for being watered down? It's like, that's an interesting conversation, I think.
I think it's even more important now in an age of generative AI because, and I've talked about this quite a bit in other places too, but for me, generative AI makes complete sense in a culture that's obsessed with fandom content. Like, I don't think you can realistically or practically divorce fandoms from what AI is designed to do. AI is designed to make authorless images that are riffing on the works of other people as quickly as possible without paying the people behind them and without having their vision behind them. And fandom content is that too. It's the same thing. DC can say all day, every day, that they're not going to use generative AI to replace artists. But guess what, man? You're DC Comics. You were founded by the mafia smuggling your comics and getting people to sell away their rights to you. And the guy who co-created Batman didn't even get a cover on the cover until like 80 years later. It's not different. It never was different. This is just the next step of it. So in a situation like that, where things like AI can start taking off, and it's all corporate media, and it's all IP schlock, and it's all divorced from an author, the idea that you have to protect not only the originating communities, but where their art's able to get accessed, that it's not stored somewhere or put somewhere where it can be used to train AI models, or that everyone involved is signing agreements to make sure that their artistry doesn't get used for AI or can't be reproduced by AI. I think a lot of that becomes really important because, again, a big reason these two things overlap is so many of the people messing with AI to generate images are doing what? They're generating fandom images. They're generating their DBZ movies and their Batman movies and their MCU movies because they're dissatisfied with how their toys are being played with. And in a culture where fandom is all about demand and it's all about the things that they feel that they're entitled to, I think there does need to be a little bit more fandom gatekeeping that says, hey, maybe the people and the cultures and the artists that make these works are going to require you to have a little bit more effort in being part of their community if you are just living in a world where everything is AI slop.
Yeah.
So have we come full circle then? Have we gone from
I think
early
so, actually.
2010s of gatekeeping's bad, don't gatekeep, let people enjoy things, to no, you have to prove your worthiness to be a fan. And I do feel like one thing that was missing from this is the female perspective of entering the fan base, of like, oh, I like Batman too. Really? Name 5 Robins.
Yeah.
I've done it too. Like, I didn't like question her, but I had a job once, and there was this girl who I actually ended up rooming with. We shared an apartment, but she was known as like
way to
the
describe your wife. Sorry.
Hilarious, 10 out of 10. But no, I had this coworker, and she was known as like the Batman fan of the office. Like, she had her desk all decked out in like Batman posters, and her cubicle had like little Batman Funkos, because this was like late 2010s. And when I got assigned on the same team as her, I was like, oh cool, we can like talk about Batman. And so I go over to her to start talking to her about Batman, because I was like, oh, dude, I love Batman. And I came to realize very quickly she was a fan of specifically the Nolan movies and had not seen the Burton films or the Schumacher films or any animated series or read any comics at all. And I did not then like call her a fake fan or be shitty about it. Absolutely not. But there was certainly part of me that was just like, oh, okay. Like, fucking, all right, well, I guess we're not gonna talk then. Like, fair enough. So like, no, you like the disappointment of like meeting someone and then them like almost being your little mental definition of a fake fan can be like, there's that happens. The important thing is not to be a dick about it and not to like try to be shitty to people about it, because women or just any marginalized group getting into fandoms that are predominantly like straight white dudes, that is still not a great like situation. Like Carly kind of hates going into comic book shops for exactly this reason, and I kind of don't blame her. So like,
yeah, I mean, I think that part of it is always going to be a constant of like, don't gatekeep people by being misogynistic or sexist or a shitty person who just assumes that your engagement with the thing has to be mirrored by everyone else or they're not a real fan. That's the kind of thing that's never really going to go. That should never go away. That should be the basic principle. I think the problem you do really run into though is so much of the stuff that people are fans of rewards that kind of behavior, and so the cycle just continues to repeat. It's like what you were saying earlier, Matt, about this idea of being a real fan, right? Like, we had The Last Jedi, we had all of these sexist campaigns against it, we had people forced off of social media over it, and then what happened? Lucasfilm made a movie that was entirely designed to appeal to those people. You had a trans creator writing a comic about Jason Todd, who was happy Charlie Kirk died because he was a racist and a misogynist, and a fascist,
and a bigot,
and they canceled her book. And like, it's really hard to. This is a weird thing to say, but like, it's really hard to say that spaces like fandoms should be inclusive, because so much of the thing that you're including the people in are already so misogynistic or racist or bigoted in some way or another. I have no doubt that there are plenty of people that would get a kick out of watching Star Wars movies or reading comic books, but like, what's their incentive to being parts of these communities? What's their incentive to engage with stuff that's constantly rewarding a perspective that is against their existence on a regular basis? I find it really funny when like people in DC fandoms are all celebratory about like pride issues and stuff, because like, all right, hey, buy that cover, say that you're a woke DC fan or whatever. When's the last time Batman was written by a black dude? When's the last time Batman got a trans creator? Can you tell me that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, I remember having a conversation with someone about like the way you don't have to like Rey from the sequels, but the way that I guess not this person specifically, but the way that anyone voices their dislike of that character can like make people not want to be part of this fandom. It's one thing to say like, oh yeah, I just, I didn't connect with that character. I just didn't think she was super compelling to me, and I just didn't find her to be a super interesting protagonist. That's fine. Totally fine. But if you're just like, oh, she's just they just made it woke and she's just a stupid self-insert, for Kathleen Kennedy, Mary Sue shit character. It's like, it's not that I'm saying you have to like this character, but the way you are voicing your dislike is creating an environment where it's like, well, why would anyone want to join this fandom?
Well, but also, right, like, let's say that you are a person that really likes Rey as a character in the first two Star Wars sequels, who loves her arc and loves her alienation. Right, yeah, and loves the world that she comes from. And you fell in love with this idea that like she was given up and that she has to find meaning in her own life and all that stuff. And then you decide that you're going to live through all that abuse in the fandom because you really appreciate what The Last Jedi was doing with her. And then the Return of Skywalker, or the Rise of Skywalker, whatever the fuck it's called, Rise of Skywalker comes out, and the movie itself just validates the things that the abusive people were telling you. That it says Rey couldn't be nobody, Rey had to be a Skywalker. Everything about it that brought the female fan base on board with this character, we're going to, as a company culture, invalidate, even though you liked it. Now, the easy answer to that is just like we've been talking about, you like what you like the art you like, and then you disengage with the rest. But when we have these conversations about like getting more people into a community or a fandom, you really got to start questioning the thing that you're a fan of. How open is that thing to that other perspective to begin with, right? Ram V is maybe the only Indian comic book creator that anybody knows. I don't personally care about reading stories from DC Comics by Indian people about Indian characters, but I know a lot of people that do. And there's a lot of good Indian letterers and Indian artists and Indian comic book writers out there that are not just Ram V. But when Ram V makes a DC comic, he tries to bring that perspective into it. And as much as you want to love that, and as much as you want to appreciate that, it's also still the same company that is going to throw those characters under the bus later because of the people that create backlash, right? So you want to be inclusive in your fandom, sure, I get that mission statement. But is the thing that you're appreciating worth being inclusive for in the first place? Like, is this a thing that we should really even have fandoms for at all?
I think it's a really good place to leave it. Just leave it with questions instead of answers.
Hey.
That's all we do. Yeah. We're not here to solve the world's problems, just point them out.
Exactly.
Which, honestly, is probably kind of like solving them, and you should just appreciate us for that anyway. And, donate to our Patreons. I think Steve's the only one here with a Patreon. I don't know, Matt's life.
Yes. Join my Patreon so I can pay for dental surgery.
Oh no!
I would have to make.
Holy shit!
It's nothing crazy. It's just expensive. I have to get my wisdom teeth taken out, but they did an X-ray of my head, and they are super tangled up into my skull.
Crazy.
So like they can't just yank the tooth out. They literally have to perform surgery to get them out.
That's crazy. Man, Steve, you won't
Yeah.
be able to talk about philosophy anymore because you won't be wise. Oh,
I'm only getting 2 of them out. There are still 2 others, so I'll be half as wise.
Okay. Take that debuff. give some room to the rest of us.
Exactly. I wonder if I can get that tooth in a jar and just keep it on my desk or something.
I feel like you should be allowed to keep whatever is taken out of you in surgery. It's yours. It was a gift from your mother.
That's what I'm thinking. Like, hey, come on now. The rights to that belong to me.
Now, using Steve's teeth, I will make this AI movie about
Some Lex Luthor shit of like, yes, I keep all of my detached organs.
All right. Well, I think that's a good place to leave the episode. Next week we'll be back with some more bullshit. I'm sitting there talking to Steve about an idea, and he's seeming like kind of iffy on it. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, next week we'll be back. We'll continue because obviously we can't take a week off. We see what the fuck happens when I take a week off.
There will be Geeky Gentlemen every week until morale improves.
Oh shit! All right. Until next time, I'm the philosopher.
I'm the fandom erotica lover. No, that's
literally true.
yeah. That makes sense. I don't like that. Makes too much sense.
And I am the Luddite.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.